There are moments that become tipping points. But once in a while, you see it happening live, like you're watching a movie.
It's time to experience the built world.
"70 years ago, 35% of the US population was involved in agriculture, and now that's less than 5%.
Within the last 2 generations, most people grew some food in their backyard, whether it was chickens or some vegetables. And over the last generation or 2, we've actually lost the space and that knowledge and those skills to grow our own food.
And so what we've done is we've not only said that cities don't have farms, we've said the people that live in cities don't know how to grow food either. But if you look at Manhattan, 100 years ago, 150 years ago, there were farms on Manhattan Island. We used to build cities with the food that the people living in them needed to feed themselves.
I got to go visit a farm called FarmOne in Tribeca. It's an underground farm.
Who would imagine what you just said?
I know.
A farm underground in Tribeca. Urban farming is in many ways striving to be frictionless food production.
The beauty of urban farming is that you can use real estate from almost anywhere and create your environment.
We're underground, but we're growing, thousands of pounds of produce every month. And we're getting, as you can see, all these different types of produce in this space. So it's a really cool use of real estate. This room itself, this one that we're in, is about 500 square feet. It used to be a cycling gym, but now we're a farm, and we're right next to a 2 Michelin star restaurant, and they use our produce.
The technology that must be in and around this space. So can you tell us about the tech stack at work here?
Yeah, there's all kinds of things going on. So you can hear that we've got water flowing all around. Water is flowing into these different trays, and it's soaking up what we call a growing media. It's a little bit like soil, but it's actually clean and inert, and the plants are growing in that growing media. And that water is recirculating around the farm all the time. And that's what makes this technology, which is called hydroponics, that's what makes it really water efficient, because you're reusing that instead of losing it through the soil.
So because of the level of the controlled environment in urban farming, you have the purest environment. There's no pesticides, there's no nothing other than what you're growing in its purest form.
The way you have this set up, you really can densify the growth of this farm and maximize the real estate in the space in such a way. I mean, this isn't a massive facility, but you guys have so much at work here.
The technology is what's enabled this. So you couldn't do this kind of farm even 10 years ago. It wasn't possible.
The level of detail that you guys are bringing to life through technology, through data, through just general harmony of some of these plants, maybe even growing next to each other, has this incredible result. I mean, everything looks pristine.
Urban farming, because it's in the city, provides this connection to the consumer. So I think that experience is a big part of the drivers. Consumers want that. And that was mostly initiated by the organic movement. Local is the brand now for that.
Food miles are a real problem. And the reason for that is because once upon a time, the farms were just outside the city and you only bought what was in season. But now you can go into a grocery store and you can buy cherries from Japan or apples from New Zealand. And with that comes a huge amount of transportation. All of those food miles create a really unsustainable equation when it comes to what we eat.
We deliver by bike, sometimes by subway. And yeah, you're getting something that's been harvested literally just hours before, which is completely unheard of in produce.
That's the least amount of food miles that you'll ever get.
Consumers want clean, local, pesticide-free product, right? They don't want to have their food come from thousands of miles away. They want to understand who grew it, and they want to know and trust that it was clean. And urban farming can provide that. Yeah, some of the biggest hurdles today are the fact that cities don't recognize agriculture as a use. Cities have industrial, commercial, and residential use categories and zoning. They do not have zoning for agriculture, most cities in the world. You have to go through this arduous process to help them understand that you're either fit into manufacturing or you fit into some kind of commercial use or somewhere in between and get some amendment. And that's really difficult. And that actually does, in certain cities that don't recognize agriculture or are not encouraging it more, it really slows down the process and the investment and the development.
I just asked you a question, what inspires you? And you basically told me the never-ending challenges that this business presents to me is what inspires me. And that is, that's the attitude right there. I love it. And that kind of ingenuity is exactly what makes New York such an incredible place.
It's really important that we do take a step back and look globally, because as the climate has gotten more variable, and we've recognized that there are going to be shocks in the system, and COVID-19 is certainly another shock in the system, we want to shorten that supply chain, and we want to create systems that are more adaptable. And so indoor farms, these greenhouse and vertical farms, are part of that solution. Education is such a critical piece of this, because we're catching up with decades and decades and decades of saying farming isn't part of the city. And parents teaching us, be a lawyer, be a doctor. No parents say be a farmer, because it's considered poor and dirty and not a livelihood that we need. We have to reframe all of that.
Urban farming is just kind of the tip of the iceberg, if you will, because there are a lot of really interesting things happening in the food industry in New York. We have this concept called ghost kitchens.
So ghost kitchens is a trend that's sweeping the nation, and it just makes sense.
What it really means is a kitchen or a collection of kitchens, maybe even in one overarching space, that eliminates that front end of a restaurant, that retail aspect of a restaurant. There's no dine-in experience. It's primarily created for pickup and delivery. But what it creates is an opportunity for restaurant owners or chefs or people who aspire to be restaurant owners to strip away a lot of the risk that exists in starting a restaurant.
So in its truest form, it's a restaurant without brick and mortar footprint. My earliest memories are mopping floors and bussing tables at a restaurant. My father wanted to open up his own bar and grill. And that's when I began to see just how challenging the industry can truly be. Fast forward to 2015, I was very fortunate to be the first employee to start up here in New York called Relay Delivery.
Relay delivery.
Yep.
Okay, cool.
And what Relay did was create a technology that integrates with all the top third-party platforms. So Grubhub, Seamless, Delivery.com,
All right.
Countless others I'm sure you've never even heard of. My first day there, we did 50 deliveries. Fast forward just under 3 years later, we were just south of 1,000 restaurants executing 20,000 deliveries a day. I began to see just how big the behavioral shift was happening amongst consumers to really prefer off-premise dining. The restaurant infrastructure was never built with intent of supporting off-premise dining. Really had an aha moment and thought that there was an opportunity to, really for the first time ever, very thoughtfully and strategically design a piece of infrastructure that truly optimized for delivery.
When you're actually dislocating the act of cooking from your traditional process of building out a restaurant with just a singular brand, it opens up this vast amount of space for innovation. At Zuul, right, a restaurant can not only create a new location in one of our kitchens in less than 4 weeks. You're just basically getting the equipment, and we're here to do the rest to help you get set up. But beyond that, once you're here actually cooking, you can spin up virtual concepts. You can start to innovate with new recipes and partnerships, because you're no longer constrained by some of the traditional ways of doing business.
Because companies like Zuul are so tech-enabled, that allows them to be able to say, this is the time of year, and so we know what people will want. This is the time of day or time of week, or this is the area and the neighborhood, and these are the kinds of things that those people will want. Once you start having that information and understanding how you can better serve your customers, and it's all because of the technology they use to make this happen.
We've also recently launched Zuul Market, which ultimately allows you to order from all of our brands and it gets delivered at the same exact time. There truly is an opportunity for us to build kind of the AWS or Shopify for restaurants, if you will. We can almost allow restaurants to scale similarly to the way that you can scale a software. I think we'll start to see the infrastructure change a little bit on both fronts. Off-premise obviously will be closely mirrored to what we have behind us, but I think we'll start to see retail, restaurant, brick and mortar footprints actually shrink in size because there's a little less on-premise focus, if you will.
What you guys are doing, this concept really transcends this moment. I see this as such an interesting way for chefs or restaurant owners to experiment with a new brand, mitigate some of the risk in opening a new restaurant, but also in a way you kind of have this amazing food lab where they get to experiment and like try things and see what people like. And I can imagine they're pretty agile in changing the menu and being able to do more with less. When WeWork first came on the scene and you all of a sudden had all of these businesses that were working in the same environment and they started sharing ideas, referring clients, all of a sudden doing business with each other. What an even cooler way for that to play out in the food and beverage industry, because all of a sudden I can imagine some of these intersections and where they start collaborating.
Totally.
That's super cool.
I've been pushing for a pastrami pizza from Sarge's in Stonebridge for some time.
Corey, you're getting crazy now.
For sure.
That's super cool.
The kitchen equipment uses 35% of the energy in a restaurant. If you target that, you can actually have savings of 75%. So ghost kitchens are actually a fantastic blueprint for cities to understand the energy profile of restaurants and for them to actually design a pathway forward for a more sustainable future for restaurants in the city.
You can go to some of the finest restaurants in the world and absolutely not have an authentic experience that makes you feel good. Yet you can go to a hole in the wall that's run by a family, which is not renovated. It doesn't have modern fixtures or furnishings, but it has heart. It has clean food. It has care.
The concept of resident is to use empty spaces to bring them to life through hosting a dinner. But it's just really, really powerful experience. So I felt really fortunate to sit there with my sister at dinner outdoors in one of their most beautiful spaces in the financial district and enjoy a meal and, you know, clink glasses and celebrate life.
So about 1.5 years ago, I was invited to a dinner. I wasn't told too much about what to expect, so I show up to a basically construction site in Williamsburg, and I wasn't even sure if I was in the right place, but eventually I figured out I was in the right place. I walk up the stairs and I enter what I think was the only finished apartment in the building, and it was stunning. Just put together, pristine furniture, artwork. It was beautiful. And even more than like the magnificent apartment that I was in, the smell. And immediately I'm noticing the chef. And then I'm introduced to the sommelier. And then I'm realizing a little bit more about what's going on here. And I'm like, okay, I can be down with this.
The basis for me starting Resident came about from this chef that I met just totally through happenstance. And he really wanted to be able to create a little bit more continuity for himself and, you know, host sort of a high-end dining experience out of one location. So I let him do this out of my place, you know, 6-7 times a month. And that lasted for about 18 months. Through that experience, I met a bunch of chefs, and they were super talented chefs that were assisting him, and I got to know them. I began learning a lot about their backgrounds, about where they sat within the industry, and about what they really wanted to pursue in terms of the direction of their future career. And so they saw what the chef was doing in my home, and they suggested to me that they really wanted to engage in, a similar sort of setup for themselves, to be able to experiment from a creative sense, as well as just get the chance to build their network. And so that's really where the story began. I founded Resident to be able to work with chefs and create this platform of empowerment for them that allowed us to sort of reimagine the restaurant space. We really were looking to reimagine when, where, and how a restaurant operated. And that's where the story began.
I love that you talk about this, because I remember that first resident dinner, that first experience that I had, I really connected with the chef and his story that he weaved in so magnificently into his meal. Each dish had a flavor of his family, where they're from, his background, their story as a family, let alone as an individual.
A lot of chefs don't get the opportunity to be creative and kind of do what they always want to do. I'm half Japanese Italian, but I don't really cook in restaurants that showcase that so much, which is fine, but this gives me the opportunity to kind of like dial it in and revisit the past. I kind of took this knowing that I couldn't talk to guests and that I get really shy and awkward in front of guests, and it kind of brings me out of my comfort zone, but in a good way. And the experience is definitely nice because I don't get to see people literally taking the bites of food, and now I get to, and I get to see their reaction, and it really like warms your heart when you actually get to see someone enjoying what you made, that you like put your time and effort to. And then when you talk to people about how much excitement of food and how much they're just curious about the food or where it comes from or all those things, Doing all these like tasting menus and meeting people are pretty different than what people used to think restaurants were. So I think for the future, I think it's actually gonna be a lot more hands-on, and I hope that more people appreciate food and the service and how much work and effort go into it, and they kind of get to see it a little bit more when they're back here. When they get to see a chef push out that 5-course for them, or when they see the som tasting all the wines for them and pairing it, how much work actually goes into it. So I think for the future, this will kind of expand the horizon for guest bases of what's really behind the doors of restaurants or private dining events, or what it takes to make those like things happen, Pretty fun to see everyone's reaction and interactive with their food.
Through building relationships, you have an opportunity to be able to build that connective tissue. We believe that our model circumvents some of the prototypical costs, the fixed costs embedded in the restaurant model, such as rent, such as CapEx. We go into buildings that are, on the sales side in terms of new constructions, buildings that are high-end luxury rentals, and we also go into certain amenity spaces that have the infrastructure that we need to be able to host these experiences. My whole philosophy with real estate is in part reflective on just like how I kind of like view the world. Like, I think, as a culture, we all need to continue to try to get more efficient, right? In whatever way we can. This concept has no food waste, right? This concept, actually utilizes spaces within properties that are sitting empty every single night. Let's activate it for the benefit of your brand. Let's activate it for the benefit of your tenants, your residents, and do so in a manner that will benefit your brand. Through doing that, we're providing opportunities. We're providing an outlet for, the artists that are affiliated with our platform, and we're creating just a more efficient use of their own space. A lot of people are now discussing what the future of the restaurant looks like, and I think we're a part of that conversation.